in will now do to a small country on its eastern border. And it started all the activities, and I will name a couple, which not only was a violation of our territorial integrity, but also was an undermining of our investment prospects in that almost 3/5 of Guyana. I will come to that. And I must quote from one of our greatest statesmen, Mr. Sridhar Ramphal, in his book, Guyana in the World, the First of 50 Years and the Predatory Challenge. Being so masterful of the English language as he is, he indicated at page 84 thereof that this welcome of Guyana's freedom was not shared by our neighbor on the Western Front. As I noted in a passage of his, the singular aversion to Guyana's freedom was the very converse of all that their hero, Simon Bolivar, symbolized. Today we have in Venezuela a grasping on to the greatness of Simon Bolivar. But I want to say, before I come to Simon Bolivar, that this is how Sir Sridhar Ramphal described those that had happened in 1966. It was on the flimsiest pretext of an old and disappointed man's posthumous memoirs, set down some 45 years after the events. These shreds and patches embroidered with speculations, ambiguities, and allusions to new but undisclosed evidence. These calumnies against 5 of the most eminent jurists in the world at that time, that Venezuela mounted its international campaign against Guyana as we approached independence. As the date drew nearer, the agitation grew fiercer, threatening in veiled and indirect ways the advance of independence itself. Hence, the British conversations in Geneva in 1966, 3 months before Guyana's independence. Mr. Speaker, when leaders of Venezuela are going to quote and talk about Simon Bolivar, I wish to remind our countrymen and even the Venezuelans who will be, of course, speaking into our parliament here today, what Simon Bolivar, 1783 to 1830, had said in 1819, after independence was gained from Spain. He had indicated around that time, after the fight for freedom, that the peoples of Latin America were so used to tyranny and ignorance and vice that they would not know what to do with freedom. That government had to be appropriate to the people, and that legislators in fledgling countries like Venezuela at that time would have to work to create conditions in which their fellow citizens could enjoy freedom. This is what he said specifically. If a people, and I'm quoting him here, perverted by their training, succeed in achieving their liberty, they will soon lose it. For it would be of no avail to endeavor to explain to them that happiness consists in the practice of virtue, that the rule of law is more powerful than the rule of tyrants. And I want to repeat that. The rule of law is more powerful than the rule of tyrants, because as the laws are more inflexible, everyone should submit to their beneficent austerity. That proper morals and not force are the bases of law, and that to practice justice is to practice liberty. Therefore, legislators, your work is so much the more arduous, that we have to re-educate the men and women of Venezuela from being corrupted as a result of their training from, as he said, Spain. This profound advice from one of the greatest of Latin America's heroes must now, of course, be applied to what Venezuela, or at least be compared and contrasted as to what Venezuela seeks to do now. As a matter of fact, I feel that all of the advice of Simon Bolivar is being thrown out of the room, thrown out of the window. And so that is why we have irrational leaders now, almost people who you'd have to say had huge problems appreciating morals and justice and all of that, now trying to do certain things, obviously for their political continuity. Rationality is important in international politics. And if we do not recognize what might be the motivations of Maduro and his team, inclusive of Delcy Rodriguez, Honorable Vice President she is, I think, making statements about referendum and all of that, means, in my opinion, that there is now a deliberate attempt to transfer their irrationality onto their countrymen for purposes of ensuring that probably they can be distracted from all the problems they have in Venezuela. And Venezuela got a lot of problems, Mr. Speaker. A humongous amount. I got a book, The New Map, by Daniel Yergin, and was doing some readings in relation to what might be their motivation. And of course, he was talking about climate and the clash of nations and energy. It is not only to distract the present leaders of Venezuela, it seems, they wanting to distract their bad governance and whatever else, but it is also to extend, in view of the fact that we have now found oil in Guyana, to try to have a hand in that. I am glad that we signed the deal with ExxonMobil that had geopolitical advantages about it, although a number of people said that it was the most rotten deal that we ever did. We are going to see the benefit of it as a result of Mr. Speaker, it all started, as I said, in Venezuela under especially Hugo Chavez, with his mantra of socialism of the 21st century, and it would become Chavez after Maduro thereafter. But what Venezuela suffers from now is tremendous economic and even a humanitarian disaster. I mean, we know that in the 1990s, Venezuela was hitting 3.3 million barrels per day. Today, it's about 600,000 barrels per day. We know that so many people have left the country, about 6 million, it's millions. Inflation has annualized to almost an unimaginable 1 million%. These are notes I took from Daniel Jorgen. 1 million% is their inflation rate. And of course, in 2018, Maduro won a second term. And of course, I suppose they want now not to get all that 300 billion barrels of reserve exploited so that they could give Venezuelans a better chance. They're now eyeing Guyana. That kind of politics that is played in our region is going to be disastrous for this region. And the provocation, as we are seeing, has now gone to a referendum, as I said, to transfer the irrationality onto the ordinary, simple, peace-loving citizenry of Venezuela. Mr. Speaker, we cannot allow that, and it is for that reason, too, that we are all here united. And what more unity I see in this assembly sitting here is the fact that we have the diplomatic corps. We have so many others with us appreciating that indeed there must not be any confrontation on that western border. Mr. Speaker, we have suffered greatly since this 1960 attitude and approach of Venezuela. When we gained independence, Venezuela under President Leone placed an advertisement in the Times newspaper of London in June 15, 1968 to the effect that Essequibo belonged to Venezuela and that we do not recognize economic concessions that were to be granted by the government of Guyana at that time. Again, same president issued a decree, 1152 of July 9, 1968, purporting to annex a 9-mile-wide belt of sea space along Guyana's entire Essequibo coast. And that was, as I said, July 1968. I remember, as a member of the PPP then, in 2000, Beale Aerospace came here. And another big reversal in investment happened when President Chavez issued a blunt rejection of the agreement between Guyana government and Beale Aerospace Corporation of the United States to establish a satellite launch facility in the Waini. We also saw, and I take these from the book that was written by Brigadier Arthur Granger, Caribbean Geopolitics, and a historian of repute. We also had President Rafael Caldera Rodriguez in 1969, or I think it was 1970, blocked Guyana's attempt to allow petroleum exploration rights in the Essequibo by Dimitex, a German company. President Lula Herrera Campins, sometime in 1980, reinforced the blockade by obstructing the development of the Upper Mazaruni hydropower project. He said that the whole of Essequibo belongs to them, and he asserted. And of course, Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jose Zambrano wrote a letter giving the president of the World Bank an ultimatum to refrain from financing the Upper Mazaruni hydroelectric project. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding all of this, we also saw in 2013, October the 10th, when the frigate Yacuana of the Bolivarian Navy of Venezuela, entering Guyana's exclusive economic zone, and under the threat of force, prevented the unarmed vessel Technic Perdana from conducting seismic surveys. And you know, I remember the same day that we were supposed to inaugurate Brigadier General as the 9th president, Arthur Granger. And on our 49th anniversary of independence, the president of Venezuela then made decree number 1787, stating that that entire coastal plain and the Essequibo there, and even almost to Demerara, they own everything. Continental shelf, exclusive economic zone, all the resources they're under. On the day after that elections, a couple of days after the elections, when President Granger was supposed to be sworn in, and on the 49th anniversary of our independence. Decree 1787. But of course, we went ahead, knowing the geopolitical value of an agreement, now that they have found oil, with Exxon, and not only Exxon, it included a Chinese company, Sino. We understand too that Chevron has bought their of the third company, and we have two very large American companies there. But we had all the time did the acts of eminent domain, meaning acts of our sovereignty over Venezuela, over Essequibo, and Venezuela was well aware of those acts. We, in 1977, enacted the Maritime Boundaries Act on June 30th. We also, November 10th, 1993, endorsed Guyana's ratification of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. And we, of course, later on, as is stated so meticulously in this book written by David Arthur Granger, that indeed the 60th instrument of ratification, November 16, 1993, enabling the convention to enter into force a year later. Guyana also took steps towards the consolidation of sovereignty over its marine resources with the introduction of the Petroleum Exploration and Production Act of 1986. That became the law in June 1986. And of course, licenses were issued under the Act in 1999, of course, to Exxon. And we have also done all that which makes it very clear that Essequibo belongs to us by entering fishing agreements, so many other acts of eminent domain, bilateral fishing agreements allowing foreign vessels to fish in Guyana's waters. And I want to say, with all these activities we did, that was to ensure that we can get the benefit of that largesse out there, we must appreciate that indeed it is our land and nobody else's. Not a blade of grass. And though we may have this situation where they are going to do some saber rattling, we are not going to give up. Guyanese all across this country, in the diaspora, and we have got the wide diaspora. I understand we got some people from Alaska and so on, in Alaska. We are very, very clear and united on this issue. We must ensure that this bonanza that is Essequibo, that is ours, be exploited, and we must not have confrontation from our Western neighbors to any extent. We must see also the flourishing of Guyana, because the space must be allowed without any intervention from any dominant big player called Venezuela. Mr. Speaker, we are going to have a couple of speakers talking, and I don't want to repeat a number of the points that I understand that they will speak on. But I make the point that in this polarized world that we have, there is going to be, and even Mr. Daniel Jurgen talks about it in his book, there is going to be even bigger rivalries all across the globe, especially because of oil, energy, climate change, and so on, migration. And this deepening rivalry must be seen as not creating problems for small countries like us, who might very well now be pressured and forced to take sides with one of the big players. I want to enter that realm of talking about that just for a short moment. Deepening rivalry between, especially as we know that goes on right now, the big countries of the world, you can say it, Washington and Beijing, will expect certain players to support them and certain players to support the others, is what the others might want. As you know, given this collision and incompatible perspectives that we might have, we'll have to combine as a small country Guyana, with all those players to ensure that we get maximum diplomatic support, if not more than diplomatic support, for the purposes of ensuring that Venezuela does not touch a blade of grass. Sometimes these clashes at that higher end of the global order create grave quandaries for small countries like us. And of course, we are connected here in Guyana very closely to the USA. We are also connected culturally to China. So we must not feel any pressure to align with one side, knowing very well that there might be sides taken in relation to certain issues. I do not want to see non-alignment being pressured out of existence. And so I hope that our government, with the support from the opposition, will ensure that the diplomatic work that is done meets that target of ensuring that we can get the support of everybody in the world on this matter. We are one step there almost, because we have done the international law method of carrying it to the ICJ. That's important. And we must adhere to our treaties. We must all adhere to the rule of law, international rule of law. We must adhere to territoriality as prescribed years, 200 years ago, 100 years ago, whatever, and so on. We must not make the Caribbean or this area a zone that will have conflict and confrontation. And so I urge, especially the diplomats and the diplomatic corps members that I see here today, that they do give their wholehearted support to Guyana in this cause. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I commend the motion for full support by each and every parliamentarian here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member, Mr. Ramjatan. I know everyone has been extremely attentive. Our Deputy Speaker makes her maiden speech in the National Assembly. The custom is utter silence. Honorable Deputy Speaker, Dr. Asher Kissoon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Allow me to stand on all protocols already established. Mr. Speaker, I stand before you today, before the people of Guyana. First of all, expressing gratitude for this extraordinary sit-in. To you, to the government of Guyana, to the opposition, and to my parliamentary joiner partners. This issue cannot go on. Today's sit-in is extremely important. It is a matter of urgency and must be treated as such continuously. Today I stand in full support of this motion for the government and the people of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, and reaffirm in recognition of the 1899 Arbitral Award and the 1966 Geneva Agreement. An issue such as this requires of us to stand united, and I must say that I'm very happy to see that government and opposition are working together on this. We as the parliamentary joiner also lend our voices and our support, because at the end of the day, we're all Guyanese. And in the highest house of this country, we will stand as Guyanese to defend our Guyana and Essequibo. I openly and strongly reject the referendum put forward by the Republic of Venezuela on September 21st, 2023. I quote, "Where citizens agree with the historic position of Venezuela not to recognize the jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice to resolve the controversy of Guyana's Essequibo," end quote. I openly reject the proposed question 5 in the referendum, speaking of the annexation of the territory awarded by Guyana by the 1899 Arbitral Award, granting Venezuelan citizenship and identification cards to Guyanese citizens in the regions. For the thousands of people at home, what Venezuela is saying to us, to our nation, is they have no regard for what the International Court of Justice says. That they have intention of making our Guyanese citizens Venezuelans in order to take the territory from us. We condemn this referendum and we will not be having it. Mr. Speaker, while we all agree that this is contemptuous of the legal process prevailing before the International Court of Justice, allow me to express my open and honest displeasure at the disrespect shown by the Republic of Venezuela for Guyana and its territorial integrity. Our Guyana is a peaceful nation. It has been for more than 50 years, 56 years, counting. And what we have been seeing happening at Venezuela's borders and ongoing in their country is very distasteful. Internationally, there has been a lot of unrest. There have been wars, the issues, just to mention a few, in Israel, Ukraine. And I stand here to say that Guyana must lead by example in showing the world that peace comes first. And we will not bow to Venezuela's threats. Mr. Speaker, with the motion put forward, we stand in support of affirming the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the state of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. I reaffirm the recognition and acceptance of the 1899 Arbitral Award and the 1966 Geneva Agreement. I denounce as unlawful, void, and of no international legal effect the referendum in Venezuela. I support the government in its pursuit to ensure a peaceful and lawful resolution of the controversy before the ICJ. I support the government's formal approach for the urgent protection done through the International Court of Justice. I support calls for the deepening of engagements among all national stakeholders. I would like to express gratitude to our international partners. A friend indeed is a friend indeed. A friend in need is a friend indeed. And we are in need. There is no time for silence. We require our international partners to speak out, to speak up, and to support Guyana as we stand on the side of the law. Mr. Speaker, the Venezuelan government needs to concentrate on giving its people a better life today and to leave Guyana alone. We see their people leaving Venezuela by the thousands, including coming to Guyana. And to be honest, Mr. Speaker, if I had leaders who had no regard for international law, I'd probably be leaving my country also. We need to continue along the legal lines, Mr. Speaker. We will not back down. We are focused on building our nation. Hundreds and thousands of Guyanese are returning home. And we will reaffirm to Venezuela that our territorial integrity will be protected. Mr. Speaker, you will hear a lot today, people will say not a blade of grass. But I stand before this House saying not one drop of sweat, not one tear from any mother or child being displaced from Essequibo, not one Guyanese citizen will be given Venezuelan citizenship because Essequibo is our own. And our territorial integrity must be protected. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Honorable Members, we will take the suspension now and return at 1 p.m. Thank you.
We are a peaceful people. Struggle is with struggle, and we don't look for trouble. Just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one Lusaki, not one right, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know. We gonna make it somehow.